Kuwait has been going into an area of constant change in terms of the politics and the economy. We're in a troublesome area. We're in the Middle East. And Kuwait is, we call it in the Triangle of Bermuda, small country surrounded by three large countries, three regionally large countries. Iran to the east, Iraq to the north, Saudi Arabia to the west, south. So we are a small country in relative terms, with a small population, but at the same time very rich. Kuwait is floating on a lake of oil, as you probably have heard this before. And Kuwait is producing in the vicinity of 3 million barrels a day. Now it's a very easy mathematical calculation of $100 per barrel. You're talking about $300 million of income a day. Add to that about $400 billion of assets in the reserves, the the future generation fund, and with the Kuwait Investment Authority. So Kuwait is a very rich boutique, but I wouldn't say it is a very well managed boutique. It's rich, it is small, it is easy to maneuver in it because the land is plain. And by the way, Kuwait government owns more than 92% of the land. That is not added to the fortune of the government. If you add that, you would, depending on how you price the land, you will get a lot more. So Kuwait is undergoing some change, but this change has not been enough to cope with the modern age. Kuwait has been lagging in development, economically in particular. Kuwait had a 5-year plan that is ending today or this year, but the actual part of the plan that is really implemented is within 6%. 94% of the plan, of the 5-year plan, was not done. Now, this is very strange for a country that has all these resources and all these capabilities. I would put the reason for that is that because we have a huge government in size, and when you have a big government in relative terms to its population, it becomes bureaucratic. And any big bureaucratic government is not only very expensive, and by the way, Kuwait government is the most expensive, again in relative terms. We are not only in the Book of Guinness and other things, but we're in the Book of Guinness as having the largest government per capita, the most expensive government per capita, the most bureaucratic, and when you have the formula of these three ingredients, then you definitely get corruption. So inefficiency is there. We have an inefficient government because of its size, and therefore you have corruption. And that is why we in the private sector has been calling for time after time to privatize, to encourage private sector to do the roles that the government is doing. That is not really its role. Government's role are for implementing the law, to make sure that there is justice in the country among the people, security, foreign relations, and protection of the country. These are the real roles of governments. the government is not supposed to build restaurants or build houses. You may pay for the needy people, limited income, help them to build their houses, but the government is not supposed to build its own by itself through its mechanics and through its system, build the houses. The government, because of this, you see the level of education is backward in government, and education is the very most important thing in any development of any society. You cannot develop a government or you cannot develop a society if you do not develop its education system and bring it up to the modern age with all the technology and the information system. Education, in my understanding, is to make the student capable of thinking properly, analyzing, and able to react to the information given in an analytical, open-minded mind, rather than memorizing the curriculum, put the exams and forget it 1 week later. So the government education system is backward, and many people are trying to send their students to private education. Why? Because the government education, although the government is spending a lot of money on education, but most of this money is going to salaries rather than improving the curriculum and improving the education as such. The healthcare, huge budget on the healthcare. Yet, many people go to private hospitals. Why? Because the government is bureaucratic, it's not able to meet the requirements of the patients. These are the two main examples. Besides, we have, with 1 million population, you have 120,000 Kuwaiti 120,000 families. That's a married Kuwaiti with a wife and children waiting for the government help to house them. Now, if you put a Kuwaiti family of 5, husband and wife and 3 children, then 120,000 application, you're talking about 600,000 Kuwaitis. That's 60% of the population. Why is that? You know why? Because the government thinks it can build it on its own merit, on its own capability, housing for these people. If the government was serious and wanted to give the private sector its role, all it will have to do is to prepare the land and give the private sector the right to build. You want to subsidize? Fine. You want to give your citizens some help? Fine. But that doesn't mean that you have to build yourself. On the contrary, building through the private sector would probably be not only faster, but also more efficient and less expensive. So these are 3 examples: education, healthcare, housing. If you want to go, the other day, I think there was a publication from the UN. It takes, I think, something like 100 signatures to get a license for forming a company. While normally in other countries you need probably 20 signatures or 10 signatures or 15 signatures. It takes in Kuwait 6 to 9 months to get a license in some cases for something. In other places it gets, you need maybe 2-3 days. Sometimes it's online. They've been trying to talk about this one window unit to grant licenses for the people of Kuwait in various ministries. Never been able to do it yet. So this money with overemployment is creating a bureaucracy that is not capable of performing, and also spoiled, because these people are not employed based on merit. They're not. There's no merit in the employment. If this young lady here does not perform, we fire her. In the government, they don't fire, they only hire.
But what is needed to make that needed change? What is the next step for actually entering this role?
You need to change the culture, the way this government is functioning. And that is, you know, the way that's functioning right now is going to create a big deficit. If not next year, it will be in 3, 4, 5 years. And with overemployment, look at the budget that was just approved last week. Almost 21 billion KD. You're talking about almost $80 billion. For 1 million people, $80 billion? To do what? Look at our roads. Our roads are in bad shape. Look at the infrastructure. We have shortage of electricity. Lots of our refineries are 30 years old, 40 years old, where Kuwait is depending on oil. We should be refining 100% of our production. The private sector now has no investment opportunities. So we in Bayan, like other investment companies, have suffered from the absence of investment opportunities. We've survived, and we hope we will continue to survive these obstacles. And we're waiting for the time that the government wakes up and says, enough is enough, we're going to change the way we do our business. And until this happens, the investment companies are suffering from lack of opportunities, investment opportunities. And when things are like this, the assets prices are going down. When assets prices are going down, the banks get worried. They don't lend. When the banks don't lend, there is shrinkage of liquidity. And therefore, you know, it's a rolling, it's a cycle.
Has your idea of doing more business outside the borders of Kuwait and going into other countries in the Gulf, outside the Gulf?
You see that, first of all, the Middle East arena is in bad shape in general. I don't need to talk about what's happening in the Middle East politically, because it's in the headline news with every newspaper probably in the world these days. But in the Gulf, although we have a GCC, but we're still, for example, we're not allowed to work in our name in some of these GCC countries, and Dubai, of course, has recovered very nicely in the last few months. Abu Dhabi's real estate is still lagging behind. Saudi Arabia is improving, but we haven't worked in Saudi Arabia. Bahrain is not in very good shape. So what is left, Qatar is a little bit closed. So really, when you say GCC, it's not really very much open, except Dubai and in the specific sector, in the retail sector. It's not really enough opportunities, enough business opportunities.
I think I came across your name in Africa somewhere. I was traveling, doing some TV programs. I think it was in Tanzania, or I don't know where I read something to do with Bayan investments. Have you been investing in parts of Africa?
No, but we were looking at Libya.
Okay. So maybe
there was a big investment opportunity in Libya. Now we've been invited. I have been invited to south of Sudan when it became independent. Yes. We have been invited to several African countries. I do receive sometimes ambassadors from these countries asking me, but I'm a little bit hesitant to go to Africa because our resources are not that vast to extend myself that far. But Libya, we had a great opportunity. But of course, with a mediocre government of Gaddafi, we were not able to operate, so I just pulled out without putting money there. But there were lots of good opportunities. But you know, you need you need a politically settled country to operate. And Gaddafi was never a person that you could depend on. Very irregular, to say the least.
Well,
Unpredictable.
I'm reaching the end of my questionnaire. Perhaps to finalize, what would be your message to people over ABC television in America watching this program? What would you tell them?
I'd like to tell our fellow American friends that, first of all, thank them for everything they've done for us when they've liberated us and when they've liberated the Iraqi people from the dictator of Saddam Hussein. But I think their job is not completed. I think, first of all, they pulled prematurely from Iraq before it is really settled. And they are abandoning the Middle East, and that's why we're in chaos. And I tell our friends, the Americans, that they have been playing the role of the policeman in the world to keep the world at peace, whether through the First World War, or the Second World War, or the trouble in Europe, or the ending of the Japanese empire into the Far East, whether it's in Korea or in China. They've always played a role, and the last role they played was in Yugoslavia, old Yugoslavia, before it got by creating peace in Europe. And now I see them that they're having a very active role in Ukraine to get stability. I think they need to do more in the Middle East to create stability. You cannot fight criminal dictators by negotiations. You've got to play a more active role in helping stability in the Middle East. And the Middle East is always very crucial to the flow of oil to the world. And I think they need to have a more active role.